Story number 1. When I started pulling the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift at a 24-hour convenience store, I eventually stopped being surprised by anything. I'd only started the job a few months ago, but I had gotten my share of drunks, loners, shuffling through the aisles at 2 a.m. But that night was different. It was just past 1:30 a.m. when the air outside felt thick and still, almost expectant. Inside, flickering LED lights cast sterile shadows along the shelves. I was standing on a battered plastic crate, restocking the top shelf of the snack aisle. My playlist played softly on my phone, barely audible over the constant hum. That's when a sudden, inexplicable chill swept through the aisle. It was more than a breeze, a cold, biting current that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I brushed it off at first, thinking the old air conditioning had kicked in, until a sensation, icy and distinct, floated across the back of my neck, like someone puffing cold air deliberately against my skin. I spun around, empty. No customers, no coworkers in sight. And then, as I resumed my work, I saw a handprint on the window, one that wasn't there a few minutes ago. Chills ran down my spine. I had cleaned the windows in the morning. When I approached the window, the eeriness still fresh in my nerves. The handprint had disappeared. I thought that I might have seen wrong, but just then I felt as if someone was watching me from outside while standing at the corner. I didn't dare to look in that direction, but it felt too vivid, too real. Without thinking much, I carefully, while glancing around the store, resumed my work. For a moment, I heard the rustle of plastic packaging echo behind me, accompanied by a subtle, almost whispered rasping. I stood perfectly still. My heart thumped so loudly in my chest that for a second, I feared it would just pop out of my body. Panic had started surging inside me, but I tried to find logic, thinking that fatigue had taken its toll on me. I thought that a nap might make more sense. I did my work as soon as I could. Just as I was restacking the aisles, I heard a faint yet clear sound of packets falling, as if someone had deliberately pushed them from the rack to get my attention. My mind was now pulsing with confusion because all these things happening weren't normal, let alone happening in the night. Despite the fear coiling inside me, I went to check the other aisles, and that's when I found several packets of chips scattered on the floor. When I stooped to gather fallen packets of chips, I distinctly remembered arranging them neatly back on the shelf earlier. Trying to steady my nerves, I turned my attention back to straightening the shelves, determined not to let paranoia get the best of me. That's when a new sound cracked the silence. A glass jar rolling onto the tile from aisle 7, coming to a clumsy, shuddering stop. My throat tightened. The sound wasn't solitary. Few other sounds followed, as if small objects were being nudged, one by one. My skin prickled, breath growing shallow, as the lights above me, so unwavering only moments ago, began to flicker. I hesitated, but curiosity and routine tugged me towards aisle 7. My shoes squeaked gently on the cold floor as I peered around the corner. Rows of jars lined the shelves, intact except for one spinning on its edge, as if someone, or something, had set it whirling. Before I could process what I was seeing, the lights cut out entirely. The silence was absolute but for the distant rattling of shelves. I fumbled for my phone, the ghostly glow of its screen illuminating my trembling hands. Instinct pushed me to retreat to the counter, and I dialed my manager with clumsy fingers. I stuttered my way through the story, a power cut, things falling, odd noises. But as I spoke, I wondered if I sounded as unhinged as I felt. Morning came, and my manager arrived, grumbling about something, while we checked the security footage. The footage showed only me, just me stacking shelves, spinning at noises, and dashing through aisles and nothing else. But when I returned to finish cleaning, I found another few packets of chips lying on the floor. Again. And then I saw a smear of jam near aisle 10, and my mind wondered how it was possible when aisle 7 was where the jam jars were kept. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what had happened. Yet to this day, every time I pick up the night shift, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder at midnight shadows. Logical explanations rarely bring comfort at 3 a.m., and I sleep with the lights on now, just in case. Story number 2. In the psych ward, routine is your lifeline. The silence that fills the halls after midnight, it's a kind of stillness that makes the hair on the back of your neck bristle. I had grown used to it, until room 5. It was a little after 1 a.m. when I started my usual chart rounds. The ward was calm, almost eerily so. The faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead was the only sound, broken occasionally by the whisper of my shoes on the polished floor. There's something about the early morning hours. It gets under your skin. But that night, it was more than that. As I passed room 5, my eyes flicked toward the door. The light spilling out from underneath stopped me in my tracks. I froze, my grip tightening on the clipboard in my hand. Room 5 was supposed to be empty. The patient had been discharged earlier that day. I stood there for a moment, trying to work through my confusion. Maybe someone forgot to turn the lights off after cleaning. Still, I couldn't shake the unease blooming in the pit of my stomach. Cautiously, I cracked the door open, just enough to peer inside without stepping all the way in. The room was just as I had expected, stark, sterile, and empty. The bed was neatly made, the sheets tucked where housekeeping had left them. But the window was open. Not much, just a few inches. There was something about it that felt wrong. I can't explain why. I fully opened the door and stepped inside. The chill in the air was sharper there, though I couldn't think of any reason why. My heart was beating a little faster now, but I forced myself to focus. This was all routine, I reassured myself. Rooms are empty, lights get left on, and windows aren't shut all the way. Nothing eerie, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I noticed the chair and hair lying on the floor. My mind went blank. The room had been cleaned already. The chair was positioned by the window, facing out toward the ward's garden. The chair should have been still, except it wasn't. It moved, just barely enough to be noticeable, almost like someone had just stood up from it, setting it rocking. If this wasn't enough, I noticed the hair lying again and felt a chill run across my body. They were long, looked as if they were of a woman, but this wasn't possible. The patient in the ward was a man. Without thinking, I muttered into my radio, asking to double-check if there had been any missing patients. I needed to hear confirmation. I couldn't see any reason for that chair to be moving otherwise. The reply crackled back almost immediately with a negative. I swallowed hard, my pulse thundering. I backed out of the room, my eyes locked on the chair until I clicked the door shut. I had seen the chair rocking back and forth, just for a fleeting second. I closed my eyes, thinking I was imagining. And then, when I opened them, the air was still. The hallway outside the room was empty. There was no sound save for the faint echo of my earlier footsteps. No one had entered or exited. Just as I was about to leave, I saw a shadow standing at the end of the hallway. The temperature had suddenly dropped. I thought it was some patient, and despite the pit forming in my stomach, I started walking. Just as I walked towards the shadow, the lights, all fine till now, started flickering, and in a blink, the lights went out. I stood there for a few seconds, but now, the shadow was gone. My mind was already confused when I heard the alarm go off. I ran towards the security to check if everything was okay. And if things weren't eerily creepy till now, the security guard told me that no alarm went off and everything was fine. But I was sure that I had heard the alarm ringing, so I went to check again. And this time, while walking in the hall, I felt as if someone was following me. I thought it would be the security guard, but when I looked back, I froze. The same shadow standing far away, the same one that disappeared suddenly. I heard a scream, and the next thing, the shadow was running towards me. I ran and the lights went off. In my hurry, I slipped on some liquid on the floor. I touched it and felt the thick black liquid smearing all over my hands. And the last thing I remember is the sheer blackness of the hallway as I passed out. The next morning, when I opened my eyes, I was lying on a bed in room number 5, the same room where all of it started. My fellow colleague told me that they found me fainted and lying on the ground. I immediately sat up, panic-stricken, and told them that there was blood spilled all over my hands, but when I looked at myself, it was gone. Nothing. My hands and clothes were as clean as they were yesterday, with only a little bit of dust on my white coat. I wanted to laugh it off, but I couldn't. Something shifted in me that night. Even now, months later, I can't go near room 5 without thinking about what had happened. Story number 3. I'm a mechanic, and like most nights for the past 6 years, I was working late to finish up some jobs my boss dumped on me last minute. The shop was located along a desolate highway about 15 miles from the nearest town. It's eerily quiet after the sun goes down. That night started no differently. It was already 11:48 p.m., and I was drenched in sweat and grease, trying to fix a car that my boss needed by tomorrow. I planned on finishing this one last car before heading home, but then the shrill ring of the shop's landline jolted me out of my focus. I nearly dropped my wrench. My heart was racing, and I cursed under my breath, trying to rationalize the sudden intrusion. Nobody calls the shop this late. Almost no one even knows this number. I wiped my hands on my shirt and walked over to the desk, staring at the phone as if willing it to stop ringing. It didn't. Finally, I picked it up. My voice cracked slightly as I answered, masking my unease with gruff professionalism. There was a split second of silence, just long enough to make my stomach tighten, and then a man's voice came through, shaky and breathless. The man told me that his car had broken down and he needed help. I looked at the clock again. 11:54 p.m. I was tired and ready to go home. I politely declined, telling him that the shop was closed. The man was persistent, telling me that he felt someone watching him on the stranded highway. I knew it was just an excuse for making me come. I was about to tell him I couldn't help when he told me that he was willing to pay as much as I wanted. Sighing heavily, I relented and agreed. 10 minutes later, I arrived near the man's car with my toolbox when I saw him, standing, facing in the opposite direction, as if watching someone. But I didn't see anyone except for a long stretch of road. I cleared my throat, and after a few tries, the man turned around. Something was off about him, but all I wanted was to complete the work and go home. I popped his hood and did a quick inspection. Nothing major, just minor fixations. I pointed it out to him, hopeful this would be quick. While I worked, I noticed that the man was acting in a very weird way, as if someone was watching him or had been waiting for him. I fixed his car in under 10 minutes, and just as he prepared to leave, I stood there for a while, basking in the brief silence of the night. That's when I saw it. Or rather, him. A figure standing motionless, faintly illuminated in the man's rearview mirror. It was tall, impossibly lanky, cloaked in solid black, as if it had emerged from the shadows themselves. And if this wasn't scary, I saw a small crooked smile, as if it was coming just right after me. I froze, trying to comprehend what the hell I was seeing. As shown in the creepy horror movies, it was advisable not to turn back, but I made the mistake. When I did, the stretch of road was empty. No figure, nothing but the cold night air and the distant hum of that man's car. His taillights disappeared into the darkness, and I was left standing there, feeling exposed, a shiver crawling up my spine. I whipped around again, scanning every shadow, every patch of road, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. There was no one, but I knew what I'd seen. While I was walking, I heard footsteps following, as if trying to catch on me. I sped back to the shop as fast as I could. As I reached, without thinking twice, I started to pack my things to leave, and that is when I heard the bells above the shop door ring. I froze, but finally looked up at the door. There was no one. I thought that it might have been the wind, but my mind couldn't shake that creepy smile, still making my skin crawl. I never saw that man again. I never found out who he had been watching or who I had seen on that highway. But to this day, I shut the shop at 9 p.m. Sharp, no excuses, and I don't drive past that road ever. Story number 4. I worked night shifts at a semi-fancy, strangely quiet hotel on the edge of the city. My shifts ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., tucked behind a polished reception desk. For the most part, I liked the stillness, but the place had quirks. The first time the elevator acted up, I thought it was some electrical glitch. It was maybe 1:15 a.m., and I was restocking the little coffee stand in the lobby. The elevator doors opened. No one stepped out. I peered inside, shrugged, and let it go. But then it happened again and again, always between 1 and 3 a.m., always to the 5th floor, with no button lit up and no one in sight. It became a joke among the staff. In my 6th or 7th week, a new hire asked about the elevator thing. I waved her off, not wanting bad vibes. The night manager at the time had told me to be careful. I wish I'd listened. One night, the lobby was eerily quiet. It was around 2 a.m. The only sound was the humming refrigerator and distant muffled thunder from a summer storm. I was halfway through balancing cash sheets when the elevator dinged. The doors opened. This time, I saw a little girl standing just outside on the marble floor. She looked directly at me. I wish I could yell or run, but instead my body just froze, everything inside me going cold. She smiled, slowly but in a creepy way. And just then, I heard a whisper as if someone was standing beside me. I quickly glanced at my side, but there was no one. I blinked and she was gone. Not running off, gone. The elevator doors slid shut. The lobby was empty. The next morning, I tried to tell myself I'd fallen asleep sitting up. But when I glanced at the camera feeds, the 2 a.m. footage glitched, pixelated and static for 5 seconds, right at that moment. It was a week later I was doing the overnight paperwork, just off the lobby by the glass entry doors. It was 2:30 a.m. The doors opened randomly. I looked up and in the reflection in the glass, saw the same girl standing beside me. My heart pounded in my chest, freezing my body instantly. And just like that, with the blink of an eye, the reflection had gone. No one stood next to me in the room. Everything seemed normal, but I knew that I had seen a clear reflection of that girl. I bolted out as fast as I could. The other night, I heard the staff talking in whispers about footsteps coming from an empty floor, a too-chilled elevator no matter the weather, and the continuous return of the elevator on the 5th floor. I didn't see her again, but there were nights where, around 2 a.m., the elevator doors would open and the air would feel electric, crawling over my skin. In those moments, I couldn't make myself look. I quit shortly after working for a few more months, partly for my sanity, partly because I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I never knew if the girl existed or not, and maybe that's what made it worse. Story number 5. It was my second week working the overnight shift at the gas station, a tiny outpost in the middle of nowhere. My friends had given me hell about taking the job, saying how creepy it'd be working all night alone, but I'd shrugged it off. I'd never been one to scare easily. That night, the rain was relentless. I had the place to myself with only the occasional sounds of raindrops leaking through the ceiling. It was nearly 2 a.m. I sat behind the counter, scrolling through my phone, desperate for something to focus on besides the eerie quietness of the station's interior. The rain cast strange shadows on glass windows. I told myself that was all it was, just the rain. But then I saw him. The man's coat was the first thing I noticed. He pushed open the door and walked in. My gut immediately tightened. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. He looked a little different, but the weirdest part, he was bone dry. Not a single raindrop on him. It had been pouring heavily outside for hours, but he looked like he'd stepped out of some car. But there was no car outside, the road empty. He didn't say a word, just stood there in front of the counter, his eyes fixed on me. It was strange, my stomach forming a strange pit inside. I asked, still smiling, if I could help him with something. He smiled, or at least he tried to. I don't know how else to describe it except to say it wasn't a normal smile. I froze, my heart racing in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me that something was terribly, terribly wrong. His hands, which had been resting calmly by his sides, started to twitch. He didn't stop staring. The air between us seemed to be colder somehow. My skin prickled with goosebumps. I asked again if he was okay, though my voice cracked midway through. I hated how scared I sounded. He said nothing. After what felt like forever, he turned, slowly, and walked toward the back of the store. Here's the thing, the back door was locked. It stayed locked at night, and I had double-checked it earlier, out of habit. No one without a key was getting through. I sat there, waiting for him to come back. But he didn't. My stomach dropped. The silence was suffocating. The only sounds that came was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rain outside. I grabbed the flashlight and slowly made my way to the back of the store. I told myself it was ridiculous to feel so spooked. Maybe this guy had slipped past me somehow, but the paranoia kept creeping up my spine. When I got to the back, the door was closed, locked, just as I'd left it. But he wasn't there. I opened the door a crack and looked out, just to be sure. The parking lot was empty, the rain still pounding. No sign anyone had been there at all. I stood there for a moment while I tried to make sense of what had just happened. Then I locked the door again and went back inside, trying to ignore the way my hand trembled. I walked toward the counter before I noticed the security camera. Staring at the camera, there was a flash of distortion on the screen. Just a split-second glitch. And in that moment, I saw him, standing behind me. The footage glitched again, and then it was gone. When I looked back at myself on the screen, I was staring directly into the camera, frozen like I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. The weirdness didn't end there. Around 3 a.m., I noticed something I hadn't before. The air conditioning was off, but I suddenly felt cold. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I glanced around the store. Something felt different, but out of place. I stayed behind the counter for the rest of the night. Every noise made me jump. I went to my manager's office in the morning to check the footage. I watched the whole thing. Fear got into me, except there was no man, just me, standing at the counter, talking into the air like a lunatic. I pointed my flashlight, walked into the back of the store, looked out the back door, still no sign of him. I handed over the keys to my manager and didn't even bother to finish the shift. I haven't been back since.